What's up, everybody? Welcome on back to another episode of Dropkicks and Joysticks. I am your host, Bloody Bill Vox. We've made it to episode 9, and what a fun ride it has been thus far, and the ride continues here, as I at least seek to best my previous podcast, which I think only lasted 10, 11, maybe 12 episodes, the Wrestling War Room. That one was fun. Used to review current wrestling, DVD releases, books. Did some interviews with some indie wrestlers, a bunch of different stuff. But this one, obviously, has been more of a focus in wrestling video games and wrestling surrounding it, my memories and my experiences. But as I've been starting to do at the top of every show, we've been talking about current events. And as I record this event, this podcast, it is Wednesday, August the 30th. We are 1 week removed from Terry Funk's passing, and we are just 6 days removed from the passing of Bray Wyatt, known in everyday life as Wyndham Rotunda. It was a very rough week in wrestling last week, and at the time that this episode drops, we will have passed WWE Payback. We will have passed AEW's All Out. But I think the major current events as of the recording of this episode that I could talk about, those two passings, and then, of course, AEW's All In London. And I'll start with that first because I think I'll put very little time into that. AEW's All In London, I had no expectations for heading into the show. I knew that they had moved 80,000 tickets. They didn't have to work very hard to move those 80,000 tickets. There was a lot of intrigue and interest in the area in AEW coming to London for the first time, especially running a stadium show. I know that there were a lot of high expectations for this show, but me personally, I set my expectation bar very low because I just wanted to see how it was all going to play out. And ultimately, the show's been very well received by a lot of people, but I'm not one of them. It couldn't hold my attention, and I don't know if that has anything to do with the passings of the previous week. I had some friends over. We were socializing and stuff. I have put on this event 2 different times as of the recording of this episode, and I have not been able to give it my full attention again. Something about it just didn't click with me. Like, there was some good stuff in it, like CM Punk and Samoa Joe, Jericho and Ospreay. Even the Adam Cole MJF match up into the finish was a good time. I like the finish of the Takeshita Omega situation. But, up front, I think in the very last episode, or maybe I said it on a Twitch stream, I said, people were complaining about multi-man matches, and I said that, I felt like AEW couldn't win on this one, that if they didn't do enough multi-man matches, they would have been accused of not bringing enough talent over. And, in this case of the multi-man matches, they're just trying to get as many people on the show as possible. I think in the end, it kind of hurt things a little bit. I said, I'm not here to do a full-on review of the show. I understood Saraya winning the women's championship, but where do we go from there? She's worked like 2 or 3 times since she's come back. Like, from a storyline perspective, what did she do to deserve that? And I understand that, they're selling the big moment. Like, 5 years ago, she was never going to wrestle again. Now she's the women's world champion. But where was the story into that? She's been playing a heel. Why should I care that she has had this milestone? And I'm not downplaying it all. 5 years ago, Saraya was told she'd never wrestle again. A very real situation. But now in AEW, she barely wrestles, and I'm sure that's by design. And now she's the women's world champion. I just don't know why I should be invested in that. I also thought it was kind of weird we brought her problematic family out to the ring for this event. But AEW can be a bit problematic itself at times. So I think that's what might have been the case here. Just, we do problematic things, so let's bring out the problematic family. And it was a really short match on top of that. The finish is where I was really lost in the whole room that I was sitting with. We were all beside ourselves because it felt like this story, very much like the Bloodline in WWE, it needed something to kind of turn the corner. Bloodline kind of missed their opportunity, and I personally feel like they missed their opportunity here to do something. And it's been a good enough story that I'll give it a little bit of faith, just like I've given to the Bloodline story. I'm fair. But why Adam Cole didn't turn? Why MJF didn't turn? I don't know. Ending the show with hugs and streamers and friendship, love, and all that other stuff just didn't do it for me. I personally was looking for a little bit of conflict. The one expectation that I had coming into this show is that something major would happen that would give me a hook to want to order another pay-per-view from AEW just 7 days later for another $50 price tag. And for me and the people in my house, seem like nobody wants to get together for this event after watching All In London. The most noteworthy thing that happened in this show, unfortunately, didn't even take place in the ring. We're I guess, affectionately calling it Brawl In. I called it Choke In because of an alleged choke, but if you've been following the dirt sheets for a while, there was a story about CM Punk and some other folks in AEW confronting Jack Perry about using real glass in a spot. Apparently, Jack Perry was none too happy with the approach, the tone, or whatever. I didn't really follow it a ton. I just knew there was the conflict. So during the 0 hour show, Jack Perry looked right into the camera and says, "See this right here? This is real glass, Cry Me a River." And apparently this led to a confrontation backstage, and there's been so many different stories as of the recording of this episode that I can't bother with them. But basically the gist of it seems to be Perry approached Punk. Punk said something to Perry. Perry said something back. Punk shoved Perry and put him in a chokehold, and then everything got broken up. I guess monitors maybe might have been knocked on Tony Khan. CM Punk might have said he hates the company and wants to quit. Samoa Joe might have had to talk CM Punk into going out to the ring. You wouldn't have been able to tell it, but it's very unfortunate for AEW that in a week of their biggest show they have held, the tags about biggest paid attendance, most attended, biggest event in history, blah, blah, blah. It was their biggest event. It was their highest attended event. I don't care about any other records, just looking at them as a company. It was their most successful event they've run yet. And unfortunately for them, it's being overshadowed by more drama. This time, CM Punk and Jack Perry. And I know the CM Punk haters out there are just using this as ammunition to say that he needs to be fired from AEW. But then there are people that are calling for Jack Perry's head on a silver platter. What has been reported as of August 30th, and I'm sure old news at this point, if you're listening to this episode, is both guys got a suspension. The only thing that I don't know as of the writing of this, or the recording of this episode, is whether or not it's a suspension that starts immediately, or if they're still going to be included in the all-out plans. When this episode drops on September 4th, the day after All Out, we'll have the answers to those questions. It would seem foolish of me to pull CM Punk off of your Chicago shows, considering that Chicago crowd will hijack and chant and ask where he is. We want CM Punk. We want CM Punk. But as for whether or not anybody should be fired, I mean, I love CM Punk. I'm becoming a big fan of Jack Perry. I don't think either guy should lose their jobs. But at some point, I think Tony Khan's going to sit down and say, listen, I pay your damn salaries. Start behaving, or I'm going to sue you for breach of contract. End of story here, folks. But again, something major to remember is that not a one of us, not a single solitary one of us, are in that backstage environment. We don't truly know what was going on. We don't know truly what was said. So no matter what a dirt sheet reporter may write and put out with their sources and whatnot, it's important to remember that it's all secondhand information. And it's funny because I basically retweeted somebody, or reposted, because we don't say retweet anymore. I retweeted somebody, reposted somebody that said, I don't care about backstage drama. I just want good wrestling. I don't care about who fought who this week. And so I reposted it, and I said exactly. I said, all it is every single one of these dirt sheet writers are driving clicks because they all have a mole inside each company that wants to feed out this drama. And it actually caught the attention of Sean Ross Sapp, which was interesting. And I'm not knocking these reporters for doing their reporting and writing what they want to write. That's what they do as wrestling journalists. I may not like what they report on. I may not like what they choose to focus on, but I'm not going to knock these guys for asking their sources. Hell, I've got a friend who works in the podcasting world of wrestling who has inside sources who at one point fed me and a friend a piece of information that had been rumored, and he was like, yep, that one is true. So, I'm not faulting these guys, but what my deal is these moles, they only seem to want to put out all the negative, all the bad, and then it's up to everybody else to speak to somebody's character when they start getting dragged, and it looks like they're just coming to defense instead of just hearing about these things on the regular, saying like, hey, Sean Ross Sapp, I'm just using him as the example. This is not a knock towards him. In fact, I find him to be one of the better journalists in the wrestling scene personally. Hey, Sean Ross Sapp, yeah, there was this fight between CM Punk and Jack Perry, but off to the side over here, something good that was going on. Miro bought this huge dinner for everybody. Multiple options to cover whether they ate meat, didn't eat meat, gluten-free. It was just his way of kind of buying a meal for everybody and saying that he appreciated his place here in AEW. And, it was real nice. There was already catering, but Miro said, no, I got this really good thing going on. I don't know. Maybe not a great example, but I just feel like wrestling reporting could do from a little bit of good. But as we all know, as Eric Bischoff has once said and has repeated many times over the years, controversy definitely creates cash. But enough of that controversy and that situation there, because at the end of the day, I don't really care. If somebody gets fired over it, somebody gets fired over it. If they're suspended over it, it's going to affect a pay-per-view, or it might have affected a pay-per-view. I just care about what goes on in front of the camera and not what goes on behind the camera. So at the end of the day, if they fought each other and choked each other out, whatever, they both wrestled their matches. I didn't see Jack Perry's because I was having streaming issues. But CM Punk's with Samoa Joe was pretty good. So, that's a good thing. But let's move on to more of the sadder news and current events before we get into the topic of discussion for this week. And like I said, as of the recording of this episode, 1 week removed from the passing of Terry Funk, 6 days removed from the passing of Wyndham Rotunda, a.k.a. Bray Wyatt. What a 1-2 punch. And then even as a third, you can lightly connect it to wrestling, but more so daytime television. Bob Barker passed away at 99. But those first two, Terry Funk and Wyndham Rotunda, were just gut punches and a half. In fact, Terry Funk, I can't sit here and profess to have this crazy long fandom of Terry Funk and be able to cite all of his major matches and things of that sort. My memory for his history is not all that great. And as my memory gets worse over time, my memory for everybody's history gets worse and worse. But Terry Funk, I remember seeing for the very first time as part of ECW. When I discovered ECW on the local Spanish channel, he was in ECW at the time, doing his sporadic appearances. I believe this was after Barely Legal. So I don't know or think he was still the ECW World Champion. But then, as a result of getting into ECW, that's how I started finding their tapes and starting to watch more of his run in ECW as that veteran that was giving back to the industry, looking to get over the next wave of talent. Just as a side note, because I never really truly know how much these microphones pick up. Apparently, there's some landscaping going on nearby where I'm recording this episode today. So if you hear a little bit of light buzzing in the background, I apologize. But unfortunately, this was the only day I could record, and I'm not quite sure how that will affect. But I'll make a mental note now to go back to around this time and take a check and see what's going on, because it almost feels like it's getting closer and closer to where I am, and then it just stopped as I'm talking about it. But we'll see. We'll check it back. So if you do hear it in the background, I apologize. Not much I can do there. But getting back to Terry Funk, that run in ECW where he was the veteran giving back was just, it was fun. He did a lot of fun promos. In fact, I recently was doing an ECW watch along, watch back, whatever, of Hardcore TV on Peacock. And some of these promos that he ran with Eddie Gilbert back in the day were hilarious. Hot stuff, Eddie Gilbert. I remember one with one of his donkeys or his horses, and he's standing at the ass end of this horse, and he's like, "Oh, Eddie, your face looks a lot different, but your breath still smells the same." Really good stuff. And he went back and forth in ECW, whether he was a baby or a heel. And he just did a lot of real fun stuff at the time in ECW. And then, of course, later on, he went to the WWE and played Chainsaw Charlie. Later landed in WCW again, where he had spent a bunch of time in the NWA and WCW. Of course, one of the most infamous moments of his NWA WCW run had to be pile driving Ric Flair on a table in '89 after the Steamboat and Flair series had concluded, and then putting a plastic bag over his head, something that deathmatch wrestler Schlack still does to this day. But at the time, it was rather taboo to put a plastic shopping bag over the head of your opponent. And it was interesting, too, that night, because Terry Funk had been put up as like this mild-mannered, kind of turning him into an announcer. And then, he kind of walked up to Flair like, "Hey, Mr. Flair, I'd like to be your next challenger, huh?" And Flair kind of brushed him off, and then that's what set it off, and they had their matches. I would have to say, if I have any major lasting impressions of Terry Funk, it's that the man was one of the wildest and craziest promos in the history of wrestling. His promo from Saturday Night's Shotgun Saturday Night. There we go. Shotgun Saturday Night, where they were in Texas and he brawls with Steve Austin and calls Todd Pettingill's mother a whore, has been circulating a whole bunch lately. He's just a wild and crazy promo. Of course, King of the Death Match in Japan, the death matches with Cactus Jack are the stuff legends are made of, as they would say. Tape traders went wild over that stuff. Terry Funk's legacy in the world of professional wrestling is almost unmatched. Not only was he a legend in the ring, not only was he decorated, but he was just as legendary and decorated at giving back to the industry. So when Terry Funk passed away at the age of 79 1 week ago, it was a sad day. Definitely pulled out some ECW cards and some NWA cards. In fact, hours before Terry Funk's passing was announced, I had just watched the card where Terry Funk tried to get that title match off of Flair and pile drove him on the table and put the bag over his head. And I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 hours. It was very close. It was crazy. I'm like, wow. I just watched Terry Funk beat the hell out of Ric Flair, and now he's gone. And then the next day, we're processing Terry Funk, and I'm sitting down. I had asked my fiance during the day, I said, "Hey, do you mind if I fire up on Twitch tonight? I think I want to kind of do a Terry Funk tribute, play Showdown Legends of Wrestling, and we'll take them through the eras, the challenge. It'd probably take about 2 or 3 hours," and she was fine with it. Like, A-okay. And we had some delays on the field because some outside sources can't keep to a schedule, but, whatever. So we were delaying, and finally we're just getting ready, starting to turn everything on, And then I'm scrolling Twitter real fast because I'm getting ready to make my post about finally getting ready to go. And I see Triple H announce that he had received a call from Mike Rotunda informing him that Bray Wyatt had passed away. So I started getting on the horn with all my buddies. And one of my buddies was like, wait a minute. He calls Mike Rotunda a Hall of Famer. Do you think Triple H got hacked? So I'm like, whoa, maybe, because Mike Rotunda is not a WWE Hall of Famer. And I went and Googled that. And then I went to the WWE Twitter page, and they had retweeted or reposted. So I said to that friend, well, if Triple H got hacked, WWE did too, because they reposted it. 6 days after hearing he passed away, it's still like, it's crazy, it's bizarre. Still can't believe it, honestly. I have a real problem with hyperfixation at times, and when the news first broke, like, yeah, I'm a wrestling fan and I love the work of Bray Wyatt, but immediately I start thinking of Wyndham Rotunda, the man who had a wife, who had 4 children, 2 from his previous marriage, 2 from his current marriage. He had a father, he had brothers, he had sisters, he had friends. I started hyperfixating on the pain that they were feeling because I have felt similar pain before. Like when you lose somebody that means that much to you, the pain is unimaginable. And I don't know what about the human brain makes me focus and hyper-focus on that sort of stuff, but that's like all I could think of. But I sat down on Peacock and I just consumed all night long Bray Wyatt content. I decided I was in no condition to sit down on Twitch, so I canceled it all together. And I just fired up and I watched Terry Funk. I watched Bray Wyatt. I focused more on Bray's stuff, I'm not going to lie, because I'd watched Terry's stuff the day before. But I watched, Bray's debut. I watched The Fiend. I watched Firefly Funhouse. I watched this 40-minute reel of all the different Firefly Funhouses. I went to bed thinking about it. I woke up thinking about it. Bray Wyatt was one of those once-in-a-generation talents. You'll never see brilliance like his again. And I know that in the months after his most recent return, even on my Twitch weekend shows, I was becoming very critical of the creative involved. And but that's not to say that I didn't appreciate the character that he was. But beneath my complaints, the brilliance was still there. I just felt like they were taking too long with their brilliance. And unfortunately, as we found out in the hours after his passing, the reason why he disappeared right as he was starting a program with Bobby Lashley heading into WrestleMania 39 is because he got COVID. And that COVID exacerbated some heart issues that he had. But most recently, it had been reported that he had dealt with something very serious, that it was life and career threatening, but that he was on the mend. And they were taking his time, or taking their time with the return, because they wanted his not only his in-ring quality of life to be top-notch, they wanted his everyday life to be top-notch. And that last part came from Triple H directly during a media call. And then he's gone. Suffered a heart attack 6 days before I'm sitting here to record this episode. When we get to this episode dropping, I think it'll be 10 or 11 days without sitting and looking at a calendar. So, it'll be a little less fresh. But right now, 6 days. I don't know that wrestling has experienced a loss this heavy since maybe Eddie Guerrero. Chris Benoit had a lot of sadness at first, but within 20 hours, we found out he killed his wife and his kids. So that sadness went away fast. But I cried over that one before I knew he had killed his whole family. But Eddie Guerrero, I remember bawling for 2 hours with my friend Chris in a darkened living room as we just watched the Eddie Guerrero tribute together. You know, we worked together a number of years, and he just randomly asked, "Hey, can I come over and watch that with you?" I'm like, "Sure, let's do that." This Bray Wyatt tribute that they ran on SmackDown was not as sad feeling as other tributes that we've seen run in the past. You know, every commercial break had a QR code to a special moment in his career. You know, some folks wore armbands. We had some beautiful tribute videos. We also included Terry Funk in this. I saw a lot of people drag how they did the tribute, and I didn't want to get into the discourse, but, you know, this is my space here, so I can do whatever I want. Those people who are complaining about everything, I wonder if they stopped to consider that it was less than 24 hours fresh for all these people. Do you think maybe they didn't want to sit in front of a camera and cry? Maybe they just wanted to go out there and perform because they could escape into that character, same way Bray Wyatt escaped into his? You think maybe they didn't want to try to come up with how they were feeling, considering it was still so fresh, not even 24 hours? Or barely 24 hours when SmackDown went on the air? I think WWE did a great job considering how short of a time they had to react. You know, Bray Wyatt's passing was announced publicly at about 7:05 p.m., I think is when I saw it, and it had been 5 minutes old, so about 7 p.m. Eastern Time on August 25th. And by the time SmackDown goes live, 25 hours have passed. So I think the WWE did a great job. And I got to get my dates right there. I kind of messed everything up there. So it was August 24th. And I may have gotten it right. I don't know. I'm scatterbrained just talking about it. August 24th, 7 p.m. is when it was announced. August 25th, 8 p.m. is when SmackDown would have gone live. In the aftermath of his passing, obviously lots of love for both Bray Wyatt and Terry Funk. The love has just been through the roof. I think Bray Wyatt's took a little more center stage, not because Terry Funk was older and it was kind of expected, but I think because Bray's was so unexpected. You know, Terry Funk was 79, Bray Wyatt was 36. To put that in perspective, I personally am 38. That one hits close to me. I'm 38 years old. He's 36, and he's gone. You know, the SmackDown right after Bray Wyatt and Terry Funk's episode, or passing, that episode paid tribute to both. AEW also paid their tributes on their television shows, Impact Wrestling. All of Conrad Thompson's podcasts have been ending with 10 bell salutes. A definite sad time for the world of wrestling, but it's been wonderful to see all the love and affection that everybody really felt for these guys. Not to say that they didn't feel it when they were alive, but to see it all pouring out at one time has been amazing. And both men left legacies that will never be forgotten. You know, Terry Funk is already a Hall of Famer. And it was in his passing that I was reminded that I actually saw him and Dory Funk Jr. get inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. And I'll always remember that they had this silly timer up on the wall. There was this big video walls that when they were standing on the stage, they could see the screen. It was counting these guys down, these legends of the business down, counting them down. So this isn't airing on TV. It's going to be edited down for TV, but it's not airing on TV. It's not live. This was before the days of them doing the live ceremony. And Terry Funk just saw that clock, and he just kept going. That was his day, and he was going to get it. The same night that Ricky Steamboat went in, Howard Finkel, Steve Austin. That was the first time Vince came out and did an induction, was for Steve Austin. And then Bray Wyatt, a Hall of Fame career You know, maybe not as many accolades as everybody else. But I think, you know, I used to make this joke that if Coco Beware can be in the Hall of Fame, anybody can be in the Hall of Fame. When people give me names that I don't agree with, I say, well, Coco's in there. And I don't mean that to be as a knock on Coco Beware, but what were his accolades in the WWE really, other than being a legendary character? Like, he had some success in Mid-South. But in terms of WWE, he was just a character with a bird. So I didn't really see that as worthy of the WWE Hall of Fame. So when I say Bray Wyatt doesn't have a lot of accolades, I feel like I start treading towards the, well, if Coco Beware is in there, anybody can be in there. But Bray Wyatt is I think he just carved out like a new category of Hall of Fame worthiness. Short-lived, impactful characters that maybe don't have a lot of accolades, but did so much in such a short time that you cannot deny the impact on the industry. Bray Wyatt was really only around for a decade. That's not a lot of time in wrestling time, especially when you consider he lost about a year and a half in the middle, and we had some character changes, all of which were received well. The Firefly Funhouse original, you know, the Follow the Buzzards Wyatt, then the Fiend Wyatt with the Firefly Funhouse, and then this most recent one where we don't really know what we were ever going to get out of that. We have no clue what we were going to get out of that version of Bray Wyatt. And unfortunately, we'll never know. Should Bray Wyatt go into the Hall of Fame automatically next year, WrestleMania 40 weekend? I would be in support of it, absolutely. You know, the very reason the Hall of Fame was created in the first place was because Andre the Giant passed away. So I don't think there's any problem with people suggesting that he should go into the Hall of Fame to honor his passing. He would have gone into the Hall of Fame either way someday. He's just got to go in much, much sooner than I think anybody ever truly expected. So before we jump into the topic of the week, I just want to send my condolences to the Funk family, to the Rotunda family, and to our now dearly departed brothers of the Squared Circle, Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt. I'd like to just say thank you to both of you guys for the countless memories that you provided, not only me, but millions of wrestling fans around the world. As somebody that has stepped in the ring, I can't imagine what it was like doing it 300 nights a year. But you guys did it, and you did it at a high level, and you did it in a way that people will forever remember your names. So I thank you both, and may you both rest in peace. And I think a good way to break this up will be to offer the customary 10-bell salute to both Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt. Welcome back to the second half of the show, my friends. I wasn't sure how much time I was going to spend talking about Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt, and I probably could have spent a lot more, but we are here today to talk about WCW nWo Revenge for the Nintendo 64. You can see the great intro video firing up. We captured this one right from the top, so enjoy. This might be one of my favorite video game intros ever. I I remember the days when wrestling video games had special intros created just for the games themselves. This one obviously being one of the more iconic ones, but whether it was just a music video of in-game footage or whatever the case may be, I miss the days of the intro where we weren't just jumping right into a loading screen, you know? I miss those days. And on this day in 1998, October 26th being that day, we were not subjected to going right to a loading screen unless you hit that start button if you were impatient. Because on October 26, 1998, for the Nintendo 64, WCW nWo Revenge launched, published by THQ, developed by AKI, and I never knew how to say this. Is it Asmic, or is it Asmic, or Asmic? I don't know. Asmic Ace Entertainment, but either way, AKI was in there. This was the second of what ended up being four WCW titles on the Nintendo 64. Thunder never got a release. In fact, if I understood a note that I saw about it, when WCW Nitro got released on the Nintendo 64, it actually included the updated roster that had been released on Thunder for the PlayStation 1, but I don't know that for sure. But this was the second of the 4 WCW titles to come out on the Nintendo 64. It was the sequel to WCW versus nWo World Tour, which will get its own episode someday because that was a wild fun time, especially with some of the unlockables. But again, we'll save that for another time. In terms of the ratings for this game, it was well received, and to this day, people still love it, still play it. I believe people still use it to mod. In fact, there was basically like a sequel version, and I need to correct myself. There were 5 WCW titles for the Nintendo 64. There was World Tour, Revenge, Nitro, Mayhem, and Backstage Assault. I forgot Mayhem originally. I had to correct myself. Geez, I shouldn't have corrected myself though, because now I completely forgot where I was. And yes, the ratings. That's what it was, and that was leading into the modding situation. Somebody even made a WCW Feel the Bang mod that is very much modeled after Revenge and World Tour and No Mercy and all of that to kind of give WCW a game what it would have looked like if they had kept THQ as their publisher into 99, 2000, 2001. Like I said, it was called Feel the Bang. Or was it Big Bang? I know Big Bang was the name of the pay-per-view they were going to have if Eric Bischoff had bought the company. Either way, Bang was involved in the title. But the point I'm driving at is that WCW nWo Revenge was in that line of those THQ wrestling video games that I often don't rank one or the other above the other because they, at their core, they all play the same. But this line of WCW versus nWo World Tour, then Revenge, and then we jump over to WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy. That is 4 of the greatest wrestling games ever produced in a row by a publisher, in my opinion. So when I see that IGN gave it an 8 out of 10, and GameSpot gave it a 7.2 out of 10, and Game Informer gave it an 8 out of 10, I'm not surprised by any of those ratings because it was, for its time, damn near perfect. It nailed the arcade feel. It supported multi-man matches with your Nintendo 64. It had memory. It had Rumble. It had a robust roster. It had a number of stages, and we'll talk about those in a moment. It had championship belts. It had tournament modes. It had a little bit of everything and almost anything you could want in a game at that time for what we could deal with. Obviously, I've talked about having dreams of these big, expansive wrestling games with legends and arenas and different stages and all that different stuff. But in 1998, we had to be a little bit realistic, right? So in 1998, we get what we get, and it was amazing. Of course, in 1999, we saw even more expansion to the video games. You know, we talked about WWF Attitude in a previous episode of this podcast. So we're a little bit ways off from that crazy expansion, but for the time when this came out in 1998, it was amazing. In fact, WCW nWo Revenge is the very reason that I asked for a Nintendo 64, because it came out in October, and it was right before my mother had asked for any sort of Christmas ideas. So I said I want the Nintendo 64, and I want WCW nWo Revenge as my one game, because if I recall, it was not a console that came with a free game. Like the Super Nintendo had come with Super Mario World. I think the PlayStation 1 had come with some demo discs to get you started. If I recall, the Nintendo 64 had nothing. So I asked for the Nintendo 64 and the game, and I did not get them. I don't know if it was too close to Christmas, whatever the case may be. I did not get the Nintendo 64 and Revenge. But what I did get was enough gift cards and cash to take my... How old would I have been here? 13? Yeah, take my 13-year-old self to KB Toys at the mall and buy my Nintendo 64 and my copy of WCW nWo Revenge. In the month and change before I was able to do that, my buddy David kept bringing his Nintendo 64 over. I'd go to his house and we'd play this game like crazy. Like bonkers crazy. And I'll share a story about something he used to do that really fired me up when we would play this game in just a little bit. But let's talk a bit about the features. Again, of course, SmackDown Hotel is a major, major helper here. So if you're ever looking for great video game information and callbacks, cheats, whatever the case may be, check out SmackDownHotel.com. They don't pay me to say this. They don't even know I exist. I believe in crediting my sources, but this is courtesy of them. So let's take a look. Copy and pasted some of this here, so we're just going to read it exactly as it appears on the SmackDown Hotel website. So under the main features, we've got over 60 wrestlers, including 50 superstars from WCW and the nWo with their unique signature entrances, moves, and taunts. Pumping 4-player action with Rumble Pack supported for thudding realism. Customize your favorite wrestler and prepare to rumble with the best. Real events, including Bash at the Beach and Starrcade. Advanced game engine giving smoother animation, faster speed, and improved character AI. Instant replay feature to show off your deadly finishing moves. A 40-man battle royal mode, the winner takes all. And then, of course, full user statistics for tracking win, losses, and ties. Once you boot up the game and get beyond the super awesome menu, we have a few different options you can pick from. You've got championship, exhibition, special match, costume change, and options. Under the championship, we can go into a 10-match tournament. Not really a tournament, more of a gauntlet, because you're the same guy going again and again and again and again to compete for the various WCW championships. In this game, the championships that are represented are the World Heavyweight Championship, which is the big gold, the United States Championship, the Television Championship, the Cruiserweight Championship, and the Tag Team Championship. Now, those Tag Team Championship belts are the later models that eventually went over to the WWE, not the models that had been featured in the early 90s into 96, 97. You can kind of make out the various championship belts that you're competing for. Under exhibition, we've got 1v1, 2v2. Real simple there, singles matches or tag team. And then under special match, we've got the 40-man battle royal and a handicap match, which is funny. You know, the WWE did the 40-man Royal Rumble matchup in 2011. Turns out all these years prior, in 1998, WCW was rocking out the 40-man battle royal. So that's pretty cool. Costume change. This might have been one of my favorite features of this game because you could do virtually anything you wanted to the characters in the game. You could rename them. You could change their attires completely. I remember, because I have bought and sold my Nintendo 64 consoles a number of times over the years. One time when I bought a particular pairing of the console and WCW nWo Revenge, somebody had gone through the painstaking effort to make every character in the game a member of either the Heart Foundation, Harlem Heat, or the Faces of Fear. Oh, or they were a Rey Mysterio without the mask. And they had given them different names, everything else. So what's crazy is that the internal memory of the game will save what people do to these freaking games, but that was also the fun. I remember as a kid going into like Bret Hart, and when he had joined the nWo, I'm like, well, all of his stuff should be black and white. So I had a version of Bret Hart's attire that was black and white. Booker T's, I remember messing with the colors with quite a bit. Sting, make the Crow character into the kind of a surfer character. I remember had like a Sting as if he had joined D-Generation X, making him like all green. So that might have been one of my favorite, like, non-wrestling features of the game, because I think I spent the most time doing the tournament modes because I loved championship changes. Like, I loved having titles change hands all the time. So, and we have a very robust roster to do it with. It was split out into a few different factions. We had WCW, we had the nWo Hollywood, nWo Wolfpack, the Flock. We had our made up EWF and DAW, which I believe that one was, I think it's Empire Wrestling Federation, maybe. And then Dead or Alive Wrestling. And then we had some managers. So run through the roster right quick, because I think I can do it. Roddy Piper, DDP, Goldberg, Bret Hart, Chris Benoit, Rick Steiner, Fit Finlay, Booker T, Saturn, Disco Inferno, Jim Neidhart, British Bulldog, Glacier, Ming, Van Hammer, Canyon, Yuji Nagata, Larry Zbyszko, Barbarian, La Parka, Stevie Ray, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Psychosis, Rey Mysterio, Dean Malenko, Juventud Guerrera, Ultimo Dragon, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Alex Wright, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, The Giant, Bryan Adams, Scott Hall, Scott Norton, Buff Bagwell, Eric Bischoff, Scott Steiner, and Kurt Hennig. From the nWo Wolfpack, we had Kevin Nash, Sting, Lex Luger, the Macho Man, Randy Savage, and Conan. Then from the Flock, we had Raven, Lodi, Riggs, Sick Boy, Reese, and Kidman. The EWF was represented by the AKA Man, or the AKI Man, or THQ Man, depending which one you picked. Shogun, the Executioner, Dr. Frank, Jekyll, Maya Inca Boy. We had the DAW represented by Hawk Hana, Kimchi, Dake Ken, Burkowski. I always like Burkowski because he kind of reminded me of Steve Blackman. I don't know why. Ming Chi and Hanzo Man. And then we also had our non-playable managers in the game, Jimmy Hart, Kimberly Page, Miss Elizabeth, Vincent, Rick Rude, Dusty Rhodes, and Sonny Ono. Which leads me into the story. The story that I talked about telling that would get me super duper hot when I would play this game with my buddy David back in the day. Now, I have always been quite sensitive to domestic violence. Not to take things serious for a hot minute, but I've never been a fan. I witnessed it a bunch as a kid, and I've always been against it. Ask either one of my kids, my partner. You talk about men beating on females in that type of situation, and my eyes will bug out of my head. Apparently, even in a video game setting in 1998, it pissed me the fuck off. I don't think I've sworn all episode, made it this far in. When I would play as the Macho Man Randy Savage and I would have Miss Elizabeth at ringside, My buddy David would routinely go after Miss Elizabeth with a steel chair, folding her in half, bashing her damn skull in. And I used to yell at him. He used to scream at him. He thought it was hilarious. And of course, that's what you would do when you were friends. You'd pick at your friends. Oh, this makes you mad. Well, let me do it again, so it makes you even angrier. That was just kind of how things went between friends. But I can sit here and remember the living room that we were playing in, TV in the corner. It was the place with the living room where our couch was up against a stairwell, and then you kind of do a U-turn. You go up the, whoops, I hit the microphone there. Do a little U-turn, go up the stairs, and the TV's in the corner, sitting there playing WCW nWo Revenge on one of our many, many sleepovers. I always wondered what happened to that guy. He got a little into like conspiracy stuff for quite a while, and it just got to be a little bit too much for me. We just kind of drifted away, but if he happens to have stumbled across this, A, did I misunderstand the conspiracy theory feeling, and B, I hope you're doing well. I was never really sure what was going on. That's the thing. But it's somebody I spent a lot of time with, so every once in a while I do wonder what he's up to, how he's doing, where he's doing it. Did he become a major success because he was a really smart guy? Is he still living in the state? Has he left completely? Did he go back to school? Did he get jobs? Did he get cars? Did he get married? Does he have any kids? One of those friends you just wonder whatever happened to them. I look him up every once in a while, and I never find him, so I don't think he's on social media. And if he is, he's not using normal names. But yeah, he used to taunt me quite a bit when we played WCW nWo Revenge, namely going after Miss Elizabeth. So in terms of my reviews and my experiences with this game, I mean, I got nothing bad I can say about the game. The roster was pretty spot on for the time, and I am going to start with something new this time, courtesy of Giant Bomb, which is the historical context. And what that means is what was going on in WCW at the time of this game's release. But at the time of this release, this was the first game that you could play with Goldberg. And as we all know, Goldberg had popped the hell off in 1998. In fact, winning the World Heavyweight Championship from Hollywood Hogan at the biggest Nitro in history just 3 months before this game came out. So it was the first time you could play as Goldberg. I believe it was the first time that Bret Hart fans could play with Bret the Hitman Hart in a WCW title. It was a lot of these characters' first time being in a game, or if they had previously been in a game, it's been a while since they've been in a game. So it offered a lot of stuff, especially for WWE fans and WCW fans. Even though it was a WCW game, there's a lot of cross appeal because yes, they're WCW stars now, but these are former WWE stars as well that have never been in video games. Like, going through the list here, Piper had been in some of the very, very early stuff, I think. Maybe. I might even be wrong about that. I don't even know if Piper was in. I think Piper was in like Steel Cage Challenge or something. So he'd never really been able to play with Roddy Piper. Bret, this was his first time in a game since leaving WWE. The British Bulldog was in Warzone, but Warzone and In Your House, but again, first time since leaving the company. Let's see, the Barbarian had never been in a WWE game previously. Hogan had been in WWE games. Now he's in a WCW game. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Scott Steiner, Kurt Hennig, Lex Luger, the Macho Man. There was a lot of cross appeal to this game as well. So I mean, it had a great roster, easy controls. It wasn't overloaded with match modes. We didn't start to really see crazy inclusion of match modes until WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy. But at the time, I don't think we needed it for how well the game played, for how involved you could get into playing this game. Those tournaments alone could take up an entire Saturday. If you wanted to change your entire game's champions, the only way to do it was in the championship mode. So I remember that's where I spent a lot of my time. Not doing random exhibition matches and that sort of stuff. It was championships. Who did I want to be the world champion today? Who did I want to be the United States champion today? For me, that was where all the replay value came from, because I love championship changes. I used to be able to tell you title histories, and I can still do the original WWF championship from a point until a point, but after so long, it really starts to get fuzzy. So I don't have that kind of memory, but because this game allowed me to do physical, like, championship changes, and you eventually see this guy walk out with the belt after he wins it, and the next time you go into the thing, he defends the championship. You actually get to see these guys with the belts. It was fun. Like, what can I say? You've been watching the gameplay. If you're here on YouTube, you can see how fun it is, how great it moves. You can see why AEW tried to mimic this style of gameplay with Fight Forever. You can see why Ultra Pro Wrestling is using these games as their model for their release next year in 2024. What good can we say without starting to repeat ourselves? It's a top-notch game. I mean, is it the perfect game ever? No. Might I have given it a 9 out of 10? Maybe. If I was rating this back in 1998, I might have given it a 9 out of 10. I'm not that tough to please when it comes to my wrestling games. As long as there's something in there that is of replay value, we're good. We're good to go. So the ratings I got at the time, definitely fair. Like I said, I might have thrown it a 9. But, so like I was saying, historical context. What was going on in WCW at the time? Before we go ahead and start wrapping up this week's episode, which will now wind up being the longest episode of Dropkicks and Joysticks yet. Last week, we hit an hour on WWE 2K14, and I guess give credit to the unfortunate news of the week, but this episode is going to surpass that. But historical context, which I will start to include with each episode, courtesy of GiantBomb.com. So the first note that they put down is that this game came out almost 11 months after WCW versus nWo World Tour. References that the nWo had split, and that is referenced here in this game. Here's an interesting note. While Raven's Flock has their own separate roster listing, the group had actually disbanded 1 month prior to the game's release. Perry Saturn beat Raven at Fall Brawl in 1998, and that freed every member of the Flock from Raven's control. So when this game came out, the Flock actually did not exist anymore. Everybody was off on their own stuff. A notable, what's the word I'm looking for? Absence in this game is the Nature Boy Ric Flair. He was in the original WCW nWo or WCW versus nWo World Tour. I believe he was even in the original Nitro game, but he's missing from this one. A lot of people speculate that it's because of the lawsuit that he was involved in with Eric Bischoff and WCW after he no-showed, if you ask Eric Bischoff, or attended a Suns wrestling tournament, if you ask Ric Flair. So Ric Flair missing from this game, unfortunately. Kenyon is a character in this game that is unlocked by winning the WCW Television Championship. He was never the WCW Television Champion. In fact, the television champion at the time of this game's release was none other than Chris Jericho. Speaking of guys that you unlocked by winning matches for titles they never held, Ming and the Barbarian, Faces of Fear. They are locked characters. who become unlocked when you win the WCW World Tag Team Championships, titles that they never held. The WCW Tag Team Championships actually changed hands the day before the game's release. This game came out on October 26, 1998, which was a Monday. And on October 25th, 1998, at Halloween Havoc, let's see. I'm going to just read this because there's a lot going on here. So, the tag team titles changed hands the day before the game's release at the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view on October 25th, 1998. Up until the pay-per-view, the Giant and Scott Hall were tag team champions representing nWo Hollywood. The titles were defended by the Giant and Scott Steiner on Halloween Havoc, invoking a variation of the Freebird rules called nWo rules, in which any duo of the nWo can defend the tag team championship. They faced Rick Steiner, who was feuding with his brother Scott and Buff Bagwell, his first match back from an injury and supposedly no longer a member of the nWo. So if you're having a hard time keeping up at this point, the Giant and Scott Hall were tag team champions, but Scott Hall was not there, so they invoked nWo rules to have the Giant team up with Scott Steiner against Rick Steiner and Buff Bagwell, who is no longer a member of the nWo, except he was a member of the nWo, turning on Rick during the match, leaving Rick to face the Giant and Scott Steiner by himself, but he would ultimately win the WCW Tag Team Championship. That's right, as a solo. After his partner turned on him, Rick Steiner would win the Tag Team Championship. And choose Kenny Chaos to be his new partner the next night. But Kenny Chaos, thankfully, is not in this game. Another guy that you can unlock by winning a championship that they never held, Roddy Piper. He's an unlockable for winning the World Heavyweight Championship. He was never the World Heavyweight Champion in WCW. Sniffed it a couple times, but he was never the champion. In fact, as we noted before, at the time of this game's release, Goldberg was 3 months into his run after defeating Hollywood Hogan on the biggest Nitro in the show's history at that point in time. Billy Kidman was in his second reign as Cruiserweight's champion at the time of this game's release, the only hidden character who was actually the champion at the time, although he's represented as being a member of the flock, despite the fact that, as we noted, the stable had disbanded the month prior. Kurt Hennig is unlocked by defeating him for the WCW United States Championship. He actually did hold that title. Yes, he did. As noted here by Giant Bomb, he held the title once, winning it on September 15th, 1997 on an episode of Monday Nitro. The victory came 2 months before the release of the game WCW versus nWo World Tour, but he had not been with the company long enough to be featured in that game. In the last historical note, the Tag Team Championships changed hands the day before this game was released at Halloween Havoc, but in the follow-up to Halloween Havoc, on an episode of Monday Nitro, Diamond Dallas Page celebrates the release of WCW nWo Revenge by winning the United States Championship from Bret the Hitman Hart. Well, my friends, that's the story of WCW versus nWo Revenge. Or not WCW versus nWo Revenge. WCW nWo Revenge. I love this game. I still pick it up. I say this about a lot of the games because I'm a wrestling game junkie. That's the end result. I'm a wrestling fan through and through. I play the games all the time. So when I say, I picked it, I do. I may only play them for like 30, 40 minutes at a time, but I still pick them up and play them. But Revenge, and even World Tour, WrestleMania 2000, No Mercy, they're in that upper echelon of those games that will generally get at least an hour every time you pull them out. So if I'm recommending games to go get it, obviously if you're a wrestling collector, why is it not already in your collection? But if you're somebody on the fringe, maybe you're a newer fan who's never played these old games, but maybe you've got access to a Nintendo 64, give it a shot. I know, look at me here in 2023 giving recommendations on a game from 1998, but it's my duty here. it's my duty to tell you, is the game worth grabbing or is the game garbage? And you can usually find a copy pretty cheap too, considering the pricing of the retro market. You can typically find one pretty cheap. If I were going to pick one between World Tour and Revenge, fun question just popped in my head. Pick one and get rid of the other. Get Revenge. World Tour was great in its own way. But Revenge basically took everything that World Tour did right and did it so much better. So much better. But on that note, my friends, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here this week on Dropkicks and Joysticks. It has been a fun, mostly fun episode. Reliving WCW nWo Revenge. Of course, we talked about some ugliness in the beginning with AEW and their all in, all out, brawl in, brawl out. Do the hokey pokey, turn yourself about. And then, of course, the sad passings of Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt. So, mostly fun. It's nice to share how much you loved a character, but it's always a shame to talk about their passing. So, a mostly fun episode. But next week will be all fun. We're going to cover a more recent game because I've got a little bit of a personal tie into it. We're going to cover WWE 2K23 next week, but not so much going to cover the game so much as we are going to cover WWE 2K Fantasy Warfare. So we'll talk about the game and the features and the showcase and all of that, but we're also going to talk about WWE 2K Fantasy Warfare, my YouTube series. As this show is dropped, I just dropped the announcement that the show is coming back in October, and it will air on Friday nights. Of course, that's all subject to change, but the show is coming back for a third and final season. So with that, being announced as the final season until the next game, Fantasy Warfare is not going to go away. It's just that until the next game comes out, I'm going to find different ways to create things, using the game and other games. But next week, I want to talk about WWE 2K23, the game itself, and then the experience of coming up with, producing, sharing, interacting, the whole 9 yards around WWE 2K22 and 23 Fantasy Warfare. I'm very much looking forward to celebrating 10 episodes. It's a bit of a milestone, 10 episodes. It's a big time. And I very much look forward to celebrating that next week here on the show as we take a look at WWE 2K23 for all the modes, bugs, good times, and bad, but also WWE 2K Fantasy Warfare. And of course, as always, if you want to keep up with me on social media, you can do so at Bloody Bill Box. A bunch of different places. If you're on a social media platform and you want to know from there, just, search Bloody Bill Box. If I'm there, I'm there. If I'm not, I'm probably not going to be. The most active places you can find me are X, also known as Twitter, the artist formerly known as Twitter. That's what we should call it. The artist formerly known as Twitter. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and some other places too. But those are the most active. But until next week, have yourselves a good one out there. Hope it's been an uneventful weekend of wrestling leading into this podcast, but AEW is in Chicago, so there's probably a story that broke coming out of that event. Whatever. Well, it's about time for me to go. We'll see you next week, right here, for another new episode of Dropkicks and Joysticks with me, your host, Bloody Bill Vox.